Lawmakers have been criticizing the hush money trial. The judge and even the jury they've been criticizing. Former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, who is running for the Senate, called on Americans to respect the verdict and the process. That earned him immediate condemnation from many of his GOP colleagues, including a senior Trump advisor who said Hogan just ended his campaign for the Senate. Hogan is locked in a close race in a heavily Democratic state. Are Republicans more concerned with loyalty to Trump than even winning back the Senate?
I think we saw that, Reverend L, in 2022 when they went and nominated candidates that most everybody knew they couldn't win, and they ended up all losing in these crazy candidates they nominated. They seem to be wanting to go down this path of following Trump no matter what he does. And I find it unbelievable that the Republicans who support Donald Trump are criticizing another Republican, for saying that we should stand by law and order in this. I think this whole thing creates an immense vulnerability for Donald Trump and the Republicans, because what they've done in two major ways is tried to undermine two of the most fundamental principles of our democracy. One, obviously, we know, the trial by jury, and the other is the vote that happened in November of 2020 in this. And what they're saying is, we don't care what average citizens practicing their civic duty, whether it's serving on a jury or voting in a voting booth, we don't care what they want. We don't care what they choose. We don't care what they decide. The only thing that matters is what's good for Donald Trump in this, even if it's rejecting every voter across the country and any juror. So to me, it has created a tremendous vulnerability that I think the Biden campaign will take advantage of. It's that they don't care about what citizens want.
Michelle, what would be your advice to Democrats? Should they be needling Republicans about the Trump trial constantly, or let the verdict speak for itself?
Okay, well, I'm not a political strategist, but it seems to me, just as somebody who communicates for a living, that they should not stop for a moment. I don't know if needling is the right word, but I think that people need to be reminded again and again and again that Donald Trump is a felon, and also that there's a connection, there's multiple connections between the crimes that he's committed and the threat that he poses to democracy, both because this was a felony that was committed in order to influence the 2016 election. But more than that, Donald Trump, he tried to steal the 2020 election. He's talked about serving 3 terms, becoming a dictator on day one. If he has a jail sentence waiting, or a prison sentence waiting on the other side of a presidency, then he is not going to leave the White House. And so I think that there was already a threat that this is not just an election, but a referendum on our entire system of government. And this has further raised the stakes, because for Donald Trump, if he gets into the White House, he's not going to be satisfied with just a 4-year holiday from the criminal justice system.
Matthew, let me ask you, you are a political strategist, so what would be your advice to the Democrats?
My advice would be take the verdict and always make it a part of a broader argument, somewhat along the lines of what Michelle just said. Take the verdict and basically say, this guy doesn't care about anything but himself, and give all the examples of it, throwing out an election, all the things he says, all the things he does. But don't ignore the verdict, but don't make an argument on the verdict alone. Make the argument about the verdict as a broader case of an indictment of Donald Trump. And to me, this is not just a referendum on some lower level. This is a referendum not on Donald Trump or Joe Biden. This is a referendum on our own values, on what matters most to us. Does it matter that we live in a constitutional democracy or not? Even if the price of something is higher, what matters more to people? And so I think it fundamentally, November is going to be a question about our own values and how do people respond to those and what do they stand for.
Matthew, I want to hear your thoughts on Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, who was on Meet the Press this morning and was asked whether he'd accept the 2024 election results. Take a listen.
Well, Peter, I don't think Congress has the constitutional authority to reject electors that have been certified by a state. I will accept the results of the election and certify them if it's a fair and a free election.
Who gets to decide if it's fair?
Well, ultimately, it is up to the voters. But Any candidate of any party has a perfect right to pursue legal remedies if they believe there's been fraud or cheating in an election.
What's your reaction to Senator Cotton's response? What does it say about the state of the Republican Party that this is news?
Well, I thought it was a complete word salad. First, he starts off and says Congress doesn't have the right to, it's up to the states to decide. And then right after he says that, says, but somebody has to decide if a state is a free and fair election, and therefore Congress can make that decision and do what they want. What he's explaining of what a candidate can do is exactly what Donald Trump did, which is file court cases, do all that. He lost them all, as we all know, and then we're supposed to certify the elections. That's not what many senators, including Tom Cotton, did in 2020 when he held up the election process and tried to slow the process down in this. This, to me, Tom Cotton, I don't think is necessarily a Donald Trump acolyte. What's disturbing about Tom Cotton to me is Tom Cotton is another one of these people in the line of whatever goes, whatever principles, doesn't matter as long as we get what we want. And so he can say as many words as he wants in the course of this and contradict themselves. But Tom Cotton is another one who thinks, yeah, democracy's okay, but a dictatorship's better as long as they're pushing what I want.
Michelle, how do you respond to Cotton's comments?
Well, first of all, I thought that the entire interview was excellent, and it's really kind of how you have to interview MAGA Republicans to constantly push back on these, kind of completely fantastical assumptions and the alternative reality that so many people close to Donald Trump have managed to spin around him. And so, look, I don't think that there's any question that Republicans, if they lose the 2024 election, are going to attempt a repeat of 2020. We've seen that at every level, the replacement of election officials at the state level, at the local level. The fact that you have the Republican Party investing so much in quote unquote election integrity, which is a project in the RNC that's being headed up by somebody who has been indicted for their role in trying to steal the last election. And so, again, like I said, I think that this election is not just a referendum on Democrats or Republicans. It's a referendum on, do we want to continue to live in a constitutional democracy?
Michelle Goldberg and Matthew Dowd, thank you both for being with us. Coming up, Pride Month is here. I'll tell you why we should all celebrate by rising up and mobilizing politically for the rights of the LGBTQ community as well as other Americans.